They tortured a 7-year-old human boy, so humanity incinerated every last one of their disgusting worlds. Little Noah's agonized screams reverberated through the sterile Lemnorian lab. His tiny naked body shuddered on the icy metal table, tears streaming down his bloody face, mixing with the pooling crimson beneath him. "Mummy, please help me," Noah wailed, thrashing against the restraints slicing into his skin. 3 tall grey aliens loomed over him, soulless black eyes impassive as their spindly fingers adjusted instruments of pain. The leader, Rigel, methodically slid a razor-sharp scalpel along the child's arm, cold grey flesh splattering with human blood. The grisly vid flickered, replaced by a room full of stone-faced generals. Grizzled Commander Alexander crushed the remote in a meaty fist, icy blue eyes blazing with righteous fury. "The Galactic Council mutilated our innocent. No negotiations, no mercy," he spat, scarred face like granite. "We burn every Lemnorian world into a charred hellscape." His battle-hardened officers nodded. Major Hawkins spoke up first. "What's the play, sir? We need to send a message no alien fuck ever forgets." Alexander's fingers dug bloody crescents into his palms. "Total annihilation. We glass their planets, salt their ashes, show them what happens when they spill our blood." He met each man's gaze, voice hard as steel. "If we don't retaliate swiftly and viciously, they'll view us as easy prey. More human children will suffer unimaginably. We cannot fail." The clock was ticking. For little Noah, for all of humanity's sons and daughters. This insult to mankind's very soul would be repaid 100-fold in alien blood and bone. The scene transitioned from the sterile, blood-stained lab to a dimly lit, smoky room. Commander Alexander Thomas sat across from a grizzled, scarred man. Silas Kane, dishonorably discharged for his brutal methods, but exactly who Alexander needed. Alexander slid a folder across the scuffed table. "I need you to put together a team off the books, total deniability." Silas flipped it open, eyebrows raising at the kill list and budget inside. "You want me to take out the entire Lemnorian leadership?" Alexander's face was stone. "I want them to suffer, to feel the pain they inflicted on us. Before we scorch their worlds, we dismantle everything they cherish." A slow, cruel smile crossed Silas's weathered face. "I can do that." Silas worked quickly, recruiting a team of ex-military criminals, borderline psychopaths. Each had a skill set and a thirst for violence. There was Mac, the demolitions expert who could make a bomb from anything, Riker, the hacker able to infiltrate the most secure systems, and Vargas, the cold-blooded sniper who never missed a shot. They began training at an isolated black site. Silas pushed them to their limits, encouraging their darkest impulses. Mac cackled as he rigged explosives. Riker infiltrated classified databases with ease. Vargas hit targets from impossible distances. Their brutal methods were on full display, taking pleasure in the pain they inflicted on simulated Lemnorians. Silas watched with grim approval, molding them into a force of unflinching cruelty. Soon they'd be unleashed on the monsters who tortured an innocent boy. The Lemnorian leadership would watch, helpless as their lives were ripped away. And then only ashes would remain. The scene shifted to the grand halls of the Lemnorian High Council chamber. Rigel stood before the assembled elders, spine ramrod straight as he basked in their approval. Ornate tapestries depicting his people's triumphs adorned the walls, the very air thick with smug superiority. "Dr. Rigel?" the High Counselor intoned, his dark robes shimmering in the muted light. "Your research into human physiology has advanced our understanding by decades. The Galactic Council will be most pleased with your findings." Rigel inclined his head, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you, High Counselor. It is an honor to serve our great race." Just as he was about to launch into a grandiose speech detailing his own brilliance, the chamber doors exploded inward with a deafening bang. Silas's team stormed in, weapons raised and faces set in grim determination. The Lemnorians, caught utterly off guard, scrambled for cover. But they were too slow, too complacent in their own superiority. Mac and Vargas had them subdued in seconds, their struggles futile against the humans' brutal efficiency. Silas strode forward, his eyes locked on Rigel. The Lemnorian scientist tried to back away but found himself pressed against the cold stone of the wall. Silas's hand shot out, gripping Rigel's throat in an iron vice. "You tortured our children," Silas growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You violated our innocent, and now it's your turn." The scene cut to a montage of ruthless brutality. Silas's team moved through the Lemnorian leadership like a scythe, leaving a trail of broken bodies and shattered minds in their wake. Mac's explosives reduced grand buildings to rubble, Riker's hacking exposed their darkest secrets, and Vargas's sniper rifle found its mark with each squeeze of the trigger. But it was Rigel who suffered the most. Silas had a special plan for him, a slow, agonizing descent into the very hell he'd subjected little Noah to. The scientist was strapped to a table, his own tools turned against him. Scalpels sliced, needles pierced, and bones snapped, each new torment carefully designed to prolong his suffering. Throughout it all, Silas forced Rigel to watch as his colleagues, his superiors, were subjected to the same brutal treatment. Their screams echoed in the doctor's ears, mingling with the remembered cries of the human child. And with each new agony inflicted, each new horror witnessed, the parallels between the two became more and more stark. The cold sterility of the lab, the glint of metal instruments, the soulless eyes of the torturers, it was all the same. Only now, it was Rigel's turn to scream. In the smouldering ruins of the Lemnorian High Council chamber, Silas stood over the broken, bloodied body of Rigel. The once haughty scientist now lay whimpering, his soulless black eyes wide with terror. Silas pressed a button on his comm unit, the device crackling to life. "Alexander, it's done," Silas said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They've paid for what they did." There was a moment of heavy silence before Alexander responded, his tone a mix of grim satisfaction and weariness. "Good. Initiate the final phase." Silas nodded, even though Alexander couldn't see him. He turned to his team, their faces splattered with alien blood, eyes haunted by the horrors they'd witnessed and inflicted. "You heard the man. Let's finish this." They moved through the ruins of the Lemnorian capital, planting explosives at key structural points. Mac's hands shook as he armed each device, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on him. Riker and Vargas worked in silence, their movements mechanical, their minds numb. As they worked, a sense of unease grew among them, a creeping realization of the magnitude of their actions. They had done terrible things, things that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But it was too late to turn back now. The wheels were in motion, the end inevitable. With the explosives in place, Silas gave the order to evacuate. They boarded their ship, leaving Rigel behind, a cruel mockery of the child he had tortured. The scientist lay broken and bleeding, his life slipping away, alone in the ruins of his once great civilization. From orbit, Silas watched as the explosives detonated, a chain reaction that spread across the planet's surface. The Lemnorian homeworld burned, its cities crumbling to ash, its people wiped out in a cataclysmic instant. The flames consumed everything, leaving nothing but scorched earth and echoes of the dead. As the inferno raged below, a terrible realization dawned on Silas. In their quest for vengeance, they had become the very thing they sought to destroy. They had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. The blood on their hands, the weight of the lives they had taken, would never wash clean. He stared at the burning planet, the reflection of the flames dancing in his haunted eyes. He had set out to avenge an innocent child, to make the monsters pay for their crimes. But now, as he watched a world die by his hand, he wondered if, in the end, they were any better than the Lemnorians. In his office light years away, Alexander watched the footage of the Lemnorian homeworld's destruction. The room was silent, save for the hum of the screen, the muted sounds of 1 billion deaths. He leaned back in his chair, a single tear rolling down his weathered cheek. It was over. They had won. But at what cost? The screen flickered, then faded to black. In the emptiness that followed, the echoes of a child's screams lingered, a haunting reminder of the price they had paid, and a cold, hard truth settled in Alexander's gut. In the end, there were no winners in war, only survivors. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, an emergency session convened. Representatives from 100 worlds sat in stunned silence as the evidence of the Lemnorian homeworld's destruction played out before them. The charred ruins of once great cities, the ashen remains of 1 billion lives, all laid bare in horrific detail. As the footage ended, the chamber erupted into a cacophony of outrage and fury. Voices raised in condemnation, demanding justice for the slaughtered Lemnorians and the immediate surrender of those responsible. Alexander stood at the center of the storm, his face a mask of defiance in the face of the council's wrath. He strode forward, his footsteps echoing in the sudden hush that fell over the room. "You dare speak of justice?" His voice trembled with barely contained rage. "When it was your kind who tortured our children, who treated us as less than animals?" The council members shifted uncomfortably, some averting their eyes from Alexander's piercing gaze, but others met his stare with equal intensity, their anger unabated. "Your actions were a clear violation of galactic law," one representative shouted. "An unprovoked act of genocide." "Unprovoked," Alexander spat. "You mutilated our innocent, you left us no choice." The chamber descended into chaos once more, accusations and counter-accusations flying in a heated exchange that threatened to boil over into violence. But then a hush fell over the room as a new piece of evidence was presented. The footage was grainy, the audio distorted, but the images were clear enough. It showed the same sterile lab, the same gleaming instruments of torture, but the figure strapped to the table was not the human child from before. As the recording played out, the truth became impossible to deny. The tortured child was in fact a Lemnorian, altered to appear human. The whole affair had been a monstrous deception, a ploy by a faction within the Lemnorian government to provoke a war with humanity. Alexander watched in growing horror as the realization sank in. He had been played, manipulated into committing an unspeakable atrocity. The weight of his actions crashed down upon him, driving him to his knees. In the end, there was no defense, no justification for what humanity had done. The Galactic Council's judgment was swift and merciless. Humanity was to be exiled, cast out from the community of civilized races, left to bear the shame of their crimes for generations to come. Silas and his team, the instruments of humanity's misguided vengeance, were quietly disposed of, their names and deeds erased from the annals of history. And Alexander, once a proud leader, now a broken shell of a man, retreated into self-imposed exile, haunted by the knowledge that in his quest for justice he had become the very monster he sought to destroy. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.